This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian-approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code LISTEN50 for 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50. Code LISTEN50. Terms and conditions apply.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, right here on the Red Apple Audio Network. And folks, I'm still dragging around the cold that I got at Madison Square Garden at one of the greatest political rallies in American history. So if I stifle a cough here and there, bear with me. But I couldn't call in sick after one of the greatest and most consequential elections in American history. Well, the pollsters and the pundits told us it would be close. It was a squeaker. But in the end, it was a landslide. Donald Trump cutting deeply into a number of historical African-American voters, Hispanic voters, Jewish voters. Actually, he scored with all voters. They told us a Republican would never again win the popular vote, but he clinched it. I was with the former and future president at Mar-a-Lago, his palatial Palm Beach estate, built by Meriwether Post back in the 20s. Ironically, I was with Donald Trump when it was still owned by the United States government, and they didn't quite know what to do with it. They had boarded it up. Post had willed it to the government upon her death, and I was flying from New York to Palm Beach on a Friday with real estate developer Donald Trump, and he asked me if, before I took off for my, should I say, less impressive digs in Miami, if I wanted to walk through the property with him. I'm not much of a real estate guy, but I said, sure. It had been boarded up a long time, had a lot of water damage, and it was kind of like the Addams Family. All the furniture was covered with sheets. But Donald Trump, who is a visionary, he could see the grandeur it could be restored to. He said the government was putting it up for bid, and I said, are you going to bid on it? And he said, well, only if I could steal it, using real estate language, of course. And I believe he purchased it for $5 million. Of course, the courts in New York would later say that it's worth only $15 to $18 million. Pardon me, it was $5 million. And of course, we now know that it's not actually appraisable, but the value would be northwards of several billion dollars. Imagine the stress, if you will, of knowing that by the end of the day, or at least in the next 48 hours, there are two things that are going to happen. Either your entire reputation will be destroyed, you will be stripped of all your wealth, and you will likely unjustly die in a dank federal prison cell, or you will have the opportunity to go down in history as one of our greatest presidents, up there with Washington, Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt. I got the right Roosevelt there. Dwight Eisenhower, very underrated. Ronald Reagan, and of course now the only president since Grover Cleveland to serve a term, lose a disputed re-election, and come back to win again. Imagine the stress of that moment. But Donald Trump never flinched. He looked ebullient when I saw him Friday night A little tired, but he looked 15 years younger, which is understandable. And even he, I think, was impressed with the sweeping nature of his victory. No, he won big. He grabbed the highest raw count of the popular vote of any Republican presidential candidate in history. Prior to this, of course, he had the distinction of having been the only person nominated 3 times by the Republican Party. That record previously being held by one Richard M. Nixon. And he clinched at least 74 million popular votes, eclipsing the prior record of 74 million in the 2020 election. That's according to the Associated Press. Now, they're still counting votes. Something wrong about that. The people in France can count 38 million paper ballots in one day, yet election officials in Arizona and Nevada still toiling over votes even as we speak. There's still outstanding votes in Alaska, Maryland, Oregon, and Utah, but very shortly they'll all be in, and we will know how many record votes Donald Trump wrapped up. Republicans haven't won the popular vote in a presidential contest since 2004. That's when President George W. Bush got 62 million. Now, there is, of course, in my view, something hinky going on here. In 2016, the popular vote was 128 million. Then in 2020, the total popular vote, they tell us, was 155 million. And thus far, the popular vote for 2024 is 144 million. Now, assuming that Trump's vote will expand slightly, it still looks to me like, the Democrats stole more votes than they needed to in 2020. Statisticians and other election experts, by the way, tell me this is impossible, but, there it is. Decide for yourself. Reagan won 54 million votes in his landslide election, and that's when the country had 100 million fewer people than it does today. Now, strangely enough, President Joe Biden still had the largest raw count of the popular vote of any presidential contender in U.S. history. They tell us he got 81 million votes in 2020. Mark me down as skeptical. But when the smoke had cleared, Trump had swept all 7 battleground states. They kept telling us that Wisconsin and Michigan were supposedly tied, and had won an electoral college victory, 112 to 227. Biden, you'll recall, won the electoral college 306 to 232. We have a great show lined up for you today. Kash Patel, who is reportedly, according to Reuters, under consideration for several high-level appointments in the Trump administration, is going to join us, as is Scott Bessent, another man who they say is under consideration. The Associated Press says he's under consideration for U.S. Treasury Secretary. He's going to join us also. We're, of course, still waiting for the results of the House and Senate elections, but it appears that the Senate will be solidly Republican. A big leadership contest shaping up there. I personally am supporting my home state senator, Senator Rick Scott, to be the new majority leader. And the House of Representatives likely to be Republican, but still up in the air. So if you love politics, well, you're in the right place. It's the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network, and we've got a lot more politics for you. So whatever you do, don't go away. Don't touch that dial. We eat, sleep, and breathe politics here on the Roger Stone Show. In fact, right now, if you cut me, I'd probably bleed American politics. And we have it all right here today. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. This is the Roger Stone Show, and I'm your genial host, Roger Stone. Well, folks, it's over, and we have a winner. You know, it's interesting. Piers Morgan asked me for, I think, 2.5 years to come back on his show. I declined to do so because I thought that in an interview with President Donald Trump, he had been rather unfair to the president. I think he sandbagged him, didn't like it. And then I did come back on his show last week. I give Piers credit. He was a complete professional and gentleman. He was wearing a boutonniere. It wasn't as nice as the one I was wearing, but he and I had a great discussion, and I pointed out that Donald Trump's critics have consistently underestimated him. Ladies and gentlemen, the man is a lion. There's no other way to put it. He's now not just standing on the shoulders of giants, but he's cemented himself in history as one of those giants, in league with the likes of Washington, Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, and, well, yes, Dwight Eisenhower. See, Dwight Eisenhower's often underrated as a president because he wasn't flashy, but we had unprecedented peace and prosperity under Ike, and so shall we have it again. Donald Trump's legacy is going to be a golden age for America, where he extends peace and prosperity, economic opportunity, affordable housing, safe neighborhoods, and real justice to the American people. We're going to return to the prosperity that we enjoyed during his first 4 years in office. When I met Donald Trump in 1979, I knew almost immediately that he was destined for greatness. After he joined Ronald Reagan's finance committee and raised $100,000 at my request, we became fast friends. And after he was elected, he retained my public affairs firm to work for Trump hotels and casino resorts. To me, it wasn't a matter of if he would become president, but really only a matter of when. That's because when I suggested that he ran through the litany of candidates running in 1980. This was late 1979. He had a kind of a biting critique of each one of them. And then he said to me, well, you know, your man, Reagan, he's going to win. And I said, why? Why do you say that? And he said, well, because he has the look. You see, we live in the television age, Trump said, and your man has the look. I, Trump, have the look, but I'm not interested in running for president. Yet, I thought. That was the same year he told Oprah, who was then a friend of his, when she asked, what about you, Donald? Would you ever run for president? Trump said, I do get tired of seeing the country getting ripped off. If it got so bad, I might have to run. I would never rule it out totally. Well, in 2016, things got that bad. It was the time that the Times met the man, I guess you could say. We went on an exploratory trip to New Hampshire to test the waters. Trump was a smash hit. He spoke without a prepared text about the lousy trade deals the country had made, how our NATO allies weren't paying their fair share, and how our military had been allowed to atrophy. He said he was tired of seeing America losing. He wanted to win again. This was 1988. It wasn't until 2000 that he briefly explored a run under the banner of the Reform Party. That was an exploratory committee I had served as the chairman for. In the end, pardon me, he correctly deduced that one could only be elected president as either a Republican or a Democrat. He had briefly switched his registration in New York State from Republican to the Independence Party, which was affiliated with the National Reform Party, which would have made him eligible for their nomination. His billionaire buddy, Ross Perot, was urging him to take the dive into the race. Jesse Ventura, who had wrestled at the Trump Casino, the Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, who had also been elected governor of Minnesota, told him that he ought to take the plunge. I think he, pardon me, I think he seriously considered it because in those days, under the federal election law, the nominee of the Reform Party would get a $38 million check from the National Treasury under the Campaign Matching Fund. Wow, $38 million OPM, other people's money, to run for president. But in the end, he decided not to run. Interestingly, he won the Reform Party primaries in California and Michigan 3 weeks after he had announced that he would not be a candidate. I called him on New Year's Day that year, 2012 this was, right after Mitt Romney lost, and he said, I should have run. I could have beaten Obama. He said, I'm going to run in 2016. I said, well, Donald, I had permission to call him Donald. He said, I've heard that one before. And he said, no, this time I'm really going to do it. See, I have already filed for the trademark on the slogan, Make America Great Again. Well, the rest is, as they say, history. And now he is poised to be among the giants. While Donald Trump is ready to make America great again, having dodged an assassin's bullet in Butler, Pennsylvania, I believe he wears the armor of God, that he is anointed for this moment. He has a unique opportunity to restore this country to not only peace and prosperity, but more importantly, to bring us together, because a rising tide lifts all boats. Tulsi Gabbard is going to join us today. She's a newly minted Republican, former four-term congressman from Hawaii as a Democrat, lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, and speculated as a potential Trump cabinet member. So you're listening to The Roger Stone Show. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial. Crazy about a shark-ass man.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone. Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
Folks, just because Donald Trump won this election, that doesn't unfortunately cancel the wild spending of the Biden administration. And there's no reason that your retirement should be endangered by the bad decisions made in Washington. That's why I urge you into looking into diversifying your retirement, your nest egg, with precious metals like gold and silver. The people I trust are the folks at Colonial Metals Group. They know what they're doing. You can actually go to freegoldguide.com to read all about it. Don't be a schmuck. Protect yourself with the strength of gold by going to Colonial Metals Group today. All right, we are back with the Roger Stone show here on the Red Apple Audio Network. And joining me now is a patriot who I have really come to appreciate, a man of great courage and extraordinary knowledge, Kash Patel, who served as acting director of the U.S. Department of Defense, also was the senior counsel to the House Intelligence Committee when Adam Schiff maneuvered me into a technical violation where I did make misstatements under oath, but none of those misstatements were material, nor did they hide any underlying crime. Well, because there was no Russian collusion hoax, folks, nor was there any collaboration with WikiLeaks. Actually, Robert Mueller admitted that in his final report. The problem was the Department of Justice sought to hide that from my defense attorneys and from the American people. It was only when a federal judge ordered that the DOJ must release his entire unredacted report, we found out that even Robert Mueller and his thugs could not sugarcoat the fact that they had found, in my case, no Russian collusion, no WikiLeaks collaboration, and for that matter, no other crime. According to the Associated Press and Reuters, Kash Patel is under consideration for a number of potential positions within the new Trump administration. He has been a stalwart supporter and advocate for one of our greatest presidents, our 45th and soon 47th president, Kash Patel. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's always great to be with you. Thank you.
So first I have to get your reaction to the election because, look, I'm a political junkie. I admit it. This is what I do. I really don't know how to do anything else. I mean, I might be, working in an Italian restaurant cooking if I wasn't doing this, but that's about all I know how to do. You're a man of many talents, and you've served your country extraordinarily well in a number of capacities. And I was happy to read here in Reuters, actually, that you are among those that the president is considering for a number of appointments. And I understand that it's better for both of us not to be too specific because I know that you'll take any position the president might ask you to serve the American people. But your reaction to what happened on election night?
Yeah, well, it's always very humbling to be a very, 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 very small part of President Trump's monumental success. And I'm not the political acumen expert, but I am, the national security defense intelligence guy. And I did travel the country for President Trump on a Team Trump bus tour and a lot of surrogate events and rallies. And what I saw was a president combine in a situation, the prioritization of both the economy and also national security. People wanted a secure border. People wanted safe streets. People wanted their children to go to school and where parents were in charge. People wanted our sons and daughters to not die in another man's war. People wanted peace, and that's why they elected Donald Trump so overwhelmingly. Plus, people wanted to be able to afford America again. And I think those two things were on such a high priority list for President Trump, and that's why you saw the results you saw.
It really was stunning. First of all, I was shocked that Kamala Harris's closing message seemed to be quite simply, well, Trump is Hitler, and his supporters, including anyone out there who may be thinking of voting for him, you're all Nazis. Not a very uplifting, inspiring message. Whereas Donald Trump, I think, laid out quite specifically his plan to restore the country's greatness, starting with lower energy prices, returning to the exploration and drilling for both gas and oil, I think in the end he's going to figure out that nuclear has an important part to play as well. But he always understood that that was the cornerstone to bringing back the economy. And I have high hopes that we're heading into a golden age here. In your specific area of expertise, intelligence and national security, what do you think the first steps that the new administration should take should be?
I think President Trump has outlined them. So, in my opinion, I would say, please follow what President Trump has put out in his Agenda 47. And he made it a very simple task to reestablish the national security of this country and the world. Let's prioritize the collection of intelligence so that we can protect ourselves and our allies. Let's focus on terrorism. Let's focus on our adversaries. Let's focus on those that are doing harm to American and American citizens. And let's focus on how we get our hostages home and how we end the forever wars. Let's also give the tools that the Department of Defense and other agencies and departments need that are on the no-fail mission. And let's not focus on DEI, white rage, and climate change. These are very simple things that the American public responded to, along with let's eliminate the two-tier system of justice. Let's take politics out of the FBI and DOJ, and let's return a constitutional singular form of government in court and in our courthouses and in our courts of justice. And that's what President Trump exposed to liberal hypocrisy. As you said, when they came for him with hate and vitriol at the end, he simply said, hey, I'm here to unify it all. I've got Elon Musk, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, and so many others over here, not because I'm paying them to show up, because they believe in President Trump's mission of unity. And at the end of the day, Americans always vote for unity. They don't vote for hate and vitriol. And that's why President Trump shines so brightly.
I agree with all of that. I was pleased yesterday to see that the president put up a post in which he said that while he appreciated their previous service to the country, he would not be putting former CIA Director and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo or former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley in the new administration. This is what President Nixon used to call spent volcanoes. I think, and that he took that from Disraeli. I think he's looking for an all-new team. And candidly, he's a much wiser man than he was. Look, he was a great president in his first term. You can see the results, the most robust economy in American history. No, not only did he not start any new foreign wars, but as you know, he brought tens of thousands of our troops back from the Middle East without the countries they were leaving collapsing into the hands of our enemies when they left. He ironically, as you point out, he was the peace candidate in this election. The Democrats used to be the party of peace. We were supporters, for example, of the Vietnam War. That's because we had been lied to by the generals and by the deep state. So at the time, we didn't have all of the facts. It was Richard Nixon who ended that war on a faster timetable than our Pentagon wanted. One of the key factors, I believe, in his removal in a silent coup. We've seen now declassified CIA documents that prove to us the CIA knew about the Watergate break-in advance and had infiltrated the burglar team. We're not here to talk about Watergate, but we are here to talk about the future. Before we go to break, the Biden administration reversed President Trump's sanctions against Iran, sanctions that brought them to the brink of bankruptcy. And then they gave them more than $190 billion in what were frozen assets, which the Iranians only used to finance Hamas and Hezbollah and restart their nuclear weapons defense program. Do you see the president immediately reinstating those sanctions?
I think President Trump will take on, in my opinion, Iran as a dual threat that they are. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, which is what the Biden and Harris administration allowed them to get close to, if not already accomplished. And Iran can no longer be the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism and fund World War III into Israel and other locations and hold American hostages. President Trump's policy to Iran was full steam ahead across the board, not just sanctions, but call our allies and say, hey, if you're trading with Iran, then you're not trading with America. We need peace and stability, and Iran is responsible for more casualties of United States military soldiers than any one singular nation. So So we need to make sure that there is a policy in place, and thank God we have President Trump, who's going to not just implement sanctions, but also utilize the prowess of the commander-in-chief's seat to say, hey, it's a new world order, and we need to work together to make sure Iran doesn't launch another world war and our hostages come home.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Kash Patel, a man who served his country in a number of positions. He's got a lot more to tell us. He's going to tell us about his book, Government Gangsters. This book is indispensable, folks. He's going to tell us where to get it. So don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back with more of Kash Patel.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back, folks. Our guest, Kash Patel, who has served this country in a number of high-ranking staff roles in both the defense and intelligence communities. I met him first when he was chief counsel of the House Intelligence Committee under Chairman Devin Nunes, one of the greatest patriots it's ever been my privilege to know, a man who may have started in California. His family was in agriculture. I believe they were dairy farmers, but spent a long time in Washington, but never joined the swamp. Remembered where he came from and who he represented. A real patriot, and a man who has done an amazing job at Truth Social, where I am very proud of my profile and know it's a great place to communicate with other patriots, and every once in a while a demented liberal who wants to attack you, but we'll put them aside for the time being. Kash, you served on Capitol Hill as counsel to Devin Nunes. I'd like to ask you, do you think that now that we have, if we have, when the smoke clears, a more durable Republican majority, which I think we're going to have, do you think that Speaker Johnson should appoint a committee to investigate the January 6th committee investigation into January 6th?
You know, having led one of the most consequential investigations in Congress in modern history that actually delivered the oversight that the American people believed, I don't know what you would call it, but I think that there needs to be a commission for a lot of stuff. And I know that's not the name you give it, but there were a lot of things, not just at the January 6th Commission, which, you know, I was one of the first subpoenas issued, but they withheld evidence of innocence. They withheld my transcript. They withheld the Nancy Pelosi video where she took responsibility for the security failures of January 6th, and that's not what our congressional leaders are supposed to be doing. You know, I would hope that we see a dawn of a new day where Congress actually delivers the documents that the American people need to see, not with redactions. And that's what the transparency is all about. And I think President Trump has spoken to it. And I think if you join forces with Congress from the executive branch, you can have the most incredible period of transparency where you earn the American people's trust again in your agencies and departments and Congress. It's the only way, in my opinion, we're going to get it all back, and we've got a shot.
You know, Kash, when you were fulfilling your responsibilities as the counsel to the House Intelligence Committee, we learned that a co-equal branch of government was actually spying on you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's hard. That's hard to grasp for for, I think, the average citizen. You've written an incredible book, Government Gangsters. The government, since you held a position, the government had to clear certain portions of that book. They tried to hold you up. They didn't in the end. It's an amazing book. It really will take your breath away, folks. Tell us about the book and tell folks where they can get it.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's still a bestseller, and President Trump was kind enough to help me launch it a year ago and called it the roadmap for 2024 and, the blueprint on how we take out the corruption in Washington, D.C. That's what it is. It's what was successful in the Trump administration. It's what happened in Russiagate. It's how FBI and DOJ lied to federal judges, how they politicized the Intelligence Committee, and how they weaponized forms of justice to achieve political ends and attack people with the Constitution unconstitutionally. But the good news is there's solutions in that book, Government Gangsters, for every agency and department, including some of the things we just talked about. And you can get it at governmentgangsters.com or on Amazon or really wherever books are sold. But I think hopefully some of those ideas are implemented by the upcoming Congress and by the upcoming administration. But it's a great way, roadmap forward. Let's take out politics. Let's restore our national security mission. Let's restore law enforcement so folks aren't raided during their worship time in their houses of worship and where their kids go to school.
Folks, this book is indispensable if you want to understand what's going on these last few years, how horrific it is, and the incredible problem that Donald Trump has to solve. I highly recommend governmentgangsters.com. Go check it out. I suggest you buy it there instead of going to Amazon because, well, why give money to a multinational corporation that hates your guts, right? But please check it out. Here's a question for you, Kash. It's a little out of left field, but a lot of listeners in South Florida, because we're nationwide here in the Roger Stone Show. We now know for a certainty that the Chinese have set up a sophisticated spying operation on the island of Cuba, a mere 90 miles from our shore. Some military experts that both you and I respect tell me that there's a high probability that they also have installed missiles on Cuba, that those missiles may be defensive in nature, but that could be easily converted to being offensive missiles. What do you think's going on in Cuba right now vis-a-vis the communist Chinese? And secondarily, I know you don't speak for the president, and we don't claim that you do, but what do you think the president's policy towards Cuba will be?
Well, Cuba, in my opinion, is an example of many of our adversaries getting together and saying, how can we go about attacking in a specific way the United States of America? The CCP got in on it, the Iranians got in on it, the Russians got in on it, the drug traffickers got in on it, the sex slave traffickers got in on it, and they all combined forces along with the terrorists. And we've had the invasion in the border, and we've got 50 known terrorist affiliates in the United States currently that we can't find, and along with lots of criminals. And it's no different in Cuba. So what Russia did was they went there and said, or the Chinese did was, hey, they're so close to America, let's utilize our relationship with the Cuban government to effectuate intelligence collection operations and other offensive operations and capabilities there. So I think the way you guard against that is what President Trump did in the first administration. You prioritize collecting intelligence against people who wish to do harm to American and American citizens. And then you go about on the global stage with the WASP that only President Trump can have and issue diplomatic engagements to sit down with the Putins and the Xi Jinpings of the world and say, no, not here, not again, not ever again, not on my watch. Because they knew they could get away with it with Biden and Harris, and that's why they all wanted Biden and Harris to win. But look what's happened since President Trump was just elected. Qatar kicked out Hamas. Zelensky's looking for a way to end the war in the Ukraine. And so many other great things in less than a week, and Trump isn't even back in office. That's the WASP that he has, the president-elect, because he accomplished it when he was the 45th president. I think he's going to do it again.
Yeah, our adversaries respect only strength. They don't respect weakness. Weakness provokes aggression. This is why Ronald Reagan was such a great president. This is why Donald Trump was such a great president, because they didn't quite know what he would do. When he told them, you go into Ukraine, Mr. Putin, and we will go after you. Well, they didn't know whether he would really attack Moscow or not. But if Donald Trump told me if there was a 10% chance Well, it kept them from invading Ukraine. He told the same thing to Chairman Xi. No, you're not going to touch Taiwan, because if we do, we will attack you. And the chairman said through an interpreter, you will not do that. And Donald Trump said, really? Don't try me. Kash Patel, a great American. You can grab his book, governmentgangsters.com. It's indispensable. Thank you so much for joining the show. And Kash, I really hope that President Trump selects you for a high-level post so you can go back to serving this country so ably as you have done in the past.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day, Roger.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Are there limits to the U.S. government's debt growth? What will happen if the debts are not curtailed? What should policymakers or investors do? Those are urgent questions that legendary investor and New York Times bestselling author Ray Dalio addresses in his new book, How Countries Go Broke: The Big Cycle. The book comes out in June and is available for pre-order today, wherever books are sold.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is the most impressive woman I have met in my 45-year career in American politics. Tulsi Gabbard was a 4-term member of Congress from Hawaii, serving as a Democrat. She was vice chairman of the Democrat Party. She became an independent. More recently, she has joined the party of Lincoln, Eisenhower, Reagan, and Trump because, well, she believes in freedom. She believes in peace, and she believes in prosperity for the American people. She's written a terrific book, For Love of Country, laying out precisely why she left the Democrat Party behind. Folks, nobody, with the exception of Donald Trump, worked harder for the victory last Tuesday than former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who joins us now. Tulsi Gabbard, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you so much, Roger. Good afternoon. Good to join you and your listeners.
I'm so happy to have you because you have the courage to say things that other people don't have to say. We had dinner together last Friday night, and I think we're both happy and exhausted. You put in long, hard days on the campaign trail, both speaking with sometimes with the president, sometimes with our mutual friend, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., sometimes speaking on your own, but you put in a lot of work and you have to be very happy with the results. What is your analysis of what happened in the earthquake that took place last Tuesday?
You know, when I endorsed President Trump and spoke to him privately, I let him know that he was and is the leader that is necessary for us to save our country and save the world, and that I'd do everything I possibly could to get him elected. That was several months ago. I kept my promise because of what's at stake. You and I both know this. I think the results of this election show that the American people know what's at stake. To have such a resounding mandate come from voters, it gives me so much hope, because when you look at all of the nonsense and the lies and the attacks and the hate-filled and dangerous rhetoric that the Democrat elite, the Washington establishment, people like Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, the propaganda media, big tech, you look at all of the forces that, you know, yes, they were against Donald Trump, but really they're against the American people and our democracy and freedom and the Constitution. And in spite of all of that, in spite of the lawfare, in spite of them achieving their goal and saying that, you know, Donald Trump is a convicted felon because of their lawfare, the American people saw through it. And that gives me great hope for the path forward. for our country. It gives me great hope that as we saw President Trump bring together this unity coalition of Americans from different backgrounds, from different political parties, coming together centered around what is in the best interest of the American people and our country, and how do we stand together, yes, to make America healthy again, but really for us to get back on a path towards peace, freedom, and prosperity for all Americans. The American people heard that message loud and clear, responded, and made sure that our voices were heard through our votes, and reelected Donald Trump to be our 47th president of the United States.
You know, very few American political figures have changed parties in our country and gone on to great political success. In the United Kingdom, of course, that's not so. Winston Churchill was a member of both the Labour and the Tory parties, and distinguished himself in both parties. But here, it's a lesser tradition. I guess Strom Thurmond did it. That was a product of Southern politics, a unique situation. John Connally tried to do it. He was the governor of Texas as a Democrat, famously wounded with President John F. Kennedy when Kennedy was sadly and violently assassinated in Dallas in 1963. He went on to serve as Treasury Secretary, where he gave President Richard Nixon some terrible advice, closing the gold window and wage and price controls. We're going to talk about that with Scott Bessent later on in the show. Bessent, I should say. But that was a courageous decision on your part. It had to be something you gave a lot of thought to. I know you, and I know the stakes, and I know you didn't do it for expedient reasons. But what has impressed me is the welcome you have received. Republicans across this country who are friends of mine, they're very excited about your joining the party. It has uplifted them. It's given them hope. Many of them are quickly become your devoted supporters and advocates. Was this a tough decision for you, and how do you feel you've been received?
Yeah, Roger, it was one that I definitely thought through carefully, but ultimately it was not a tough decision because I have always done my best to make decisions around how I can best be of service and where I can make the most positive impact in that service to our country. And for many years as a Democrat, I sought to try to bring about positive change within that party. And it got to a point where I just could no longer align myself with a party that, number one, was unrecognizable from the party that I joined over 20 years ago. And number two, at its core, is against freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, our Second Amendment rights, our right to bear arms, our Fourth Amendment rights to privacy and protection against warrantless search and surveillance. It was a party that used to be a big open tent party that welcomed people from all different backgrounds and different perspectives, that defended free speech for everybody, even if they vehemently disagreed with your speech. They recognized that if we take away one person or one group's right to free speech, any one of us could be next. It was a party that had very strong and powerful voices that were champions for peace and calling for an end to stupid, counterproductive wars. It was a party that was inspired by icons like Martin Luther King and President John F. Kennedy. When you look at the Democrat Party of today, it stands for none of those things. In fact, it stands for the exact opposite. It was very telling to me that the reaction from many of the talking heads across cable television, except for Fox News, coming from the Democrat elite, was that they want to exert more control and to undermine our right to free speech. They see the solution as being government regulating social media platforms to limit our right to free speech, to stop what they view as fascism. It is very disturbing to see how governors like Gavin Newsom, their reaction, the reaction within the Biden administration, the reaction even coming from within the Pentagon, according to some reports that even CNN is pushing out, that in each of these areas they are trying to, quote unquote, Trump-proof their states or their organizations or their bureaucracies. which really says one thing. They don't care about the voices of the people in this country, which means they don't believe in democracy and they don't believe in our Constitution and our democratic republic. These are very dangerous people. The American people saw that, whether they saw it that clearly or they had an inkling. This mandate that President Trump just received really is a resounding rejection of ultimately those who seek power for themselves or profit at the expense of the people. The American people have been feeling left behind for so long, and like our leaders don't care about us. The level of trust that people have in our government institutions and political leaders is at an all-time low. They saw in Donald Trump somebody who has their back, who understands the struggles of the American people, the high cost of living. Our communities are riddled with crime. Our borders are wide open. Tens of millions of illegal immigrants streaming across the border. We are embroiled in multiple wars around the world and closer to the brink of World War III and nuclear war. I mean, all of these things point to a new Republican Party, which is why I joined the Republican Party, that stands for free speech, that stands for peace, that stands for the people, the everyday American across the country. And I give all the credit to that transformation of the Republican Party to Donald Trump. It began in 2016. It has continued since then. But you've seen how he has, through his leadership, really made it very clear that the Republican Party is no longer the party of neocon warmongers, which is why you saw Liz Cheney endorse Kamala Harris, because she felt more at home in today's Democrat Party of neocon warmongers than she did in President Trump's Republican Party.
If you're just tuning in, folks, we're talking to former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, one of the new stars of the Republican Party. And we'll be back with more of Tulsi Gabbard, so please don't touch that dial.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Hank's the family fixer, always with his tool belt. But living with prostate cancer, he needed help. He asked his doctor about Xtandi and enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Age. More precisely, I think the Golden Age for America under Donald Trump, because I think we're going to have 4 years and hopefully 12 years of unprecedented peace and prosperity for the American people. We're talking to Tulsi Gabbard, who is a 4-term member of Congress from Hawaii, a Democrat, serves her country now as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, served her country in combat in Kuwait and Iraq, served on, I believe, the Armed Services Committee, among others, and who has made a principled decision to change parties, first becoming an independent, then making the decision to support Donald Trump, and then making the decision to join the party of Lincoln and Trump, and then literally worked harder than anyone other than Trump himself for this tremendous victory on Tuesday. Tulsi, I have to ask you, I watched Joe Biden's statement, which was surprisingly gracious for him. I thought I detected a little bit of glee there because I don't think he liked the way he was unceremoniously dumped by his party. And then I saw Kamala Harris. As usual, she didn't make much sense, but she did commit herself to the peaceful transfer of power. Now, pardon me if I'm a skeptic. Perhaps it's because what my family and I have been put through when the deep state who controls a politically motivated Justice Department want you. Sadly, they can get you. And a part of me thinks that the deep state, Dwight Eisenhower called them the military-industrial complex. He tried to warn us about them. I don't think they're finished in their efforts to silence us, as you point out, to limit our constitutional freedoms and drive us to the extremely profitable wars that they keep advocating. Doesn't a part of you, Tulsi, make you wonder what they are up to?
Of course. And they're not even really hiding the fact that they are trying to limit the powers of the presidency specifically because Donald Trump was elected. This is something that began several months ago when it became clear that President Trump would be the Republican nominee for this presidential election. And the fact that this is the case and that there aren't, red alarm bells going off in all directions, pointing to really what a traitorous act this is, especially for those who wear the uniform, but not limited to those who wear the uniform, those who are serving in a position within the government whose paychecks come from the American taxpayers, many, if not all of whom swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. They are actually trying to undermine that Constitution and the powers that it provides to the presidency simply because it's Donald Trump. This is dangerous on its own, but it's even more insidious because of their mindset behind it, that they believe that they are the protectors of democracy, that they are the protectors of the Constitution, and that they are therefore then justified in undermining it in order to carry out this act that they feel morally justified to carry out, because they view Donald Trump as a threat to our country, to our republic, to our Constitution. And this is where the hypocrisy comes in, when they themselves are the actual threat because of their actions and what they're doing to try to undermine him preemptively. He hasn't even been sworn into office yet, and they're doing all they can to try to limit what he will be able to do in carrying out the mandate that the American people gave him. People voted for him because of what he promised to do for the American people. And everything from economic policy, domestic policy, immigration, border security policy, foreign policy. On every front, President Trump has been given a mandate, a clear mandate, a powerful and overwhelming one by the American people. And so we should all be very, very curious on what exactly is going on behind closed doors right now within the administration, within the executive branch, and within Congress, and demand accountability for those who are undermining and circumventing our democratic process.
Tulsi Gabbard, I want to thank you for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. I hope and pray that President Donald Trump will select you for a position in his government where you can continue an unbroken record of public service to the American people. I salute you for your integrity. I salute you for your courage. I salute you for your energy and the incredibly hard work you put into this tremendous victory. I urge folks to get your book, For Love of Country, where Tulsi lays out very specifically why she left the party of Franklin Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman to join the party of Lincoln, Reagan, and Trump. God bless you, my friend, and thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
When we get down to talking politics, the country's in the very best of hands. The best of hands.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back, folks. If you're just tuning in to the Roger Stone Show, we are pleased now to be joined by Scott Bessent. Scott Bessent is an American investor, philanthropist, and educator. More importantly, he is a key economic advisor to President Donald Trump. He is widely seen, according to Reuters and the Associated Press, as a top candidate for Secretary of the Treasury. He's a longtime hedge fund investor who taught at Yale University for several years. I spoke to the president about him when the president brought up his name last Friday night at dinner at Mar-a-Lago. I know the president has the highest possible regard for Scott Bessent. Reading here from Reuters, they say, while Bessent has long favored a laissez-faire policies that were popular in the pre-Trump Republican Party, he has also spoken highly of Trump's use of tariffs as a negotiating tool. He has praised the president-elect's economic philosophy, which rests on a skepticism of both regulations and international trade. It's a great honor for us. Scott Bessent, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, great to be with you.
So let's kind of start with the priorities here. Associated Press and Reuters have both reported that you are one of, I guess, several people being considered for the position of Treasury Secretary. I think you would be excellent in that position. When the president raised your name, when I spoke to him last Friday night, I didn't raise your name, he rose your name. I can tell you he has the highest possible regard for you. But what do you think his and the country's top immediate priorities should be?
Well, I'll stay in my lane on the economy, and I think we're going to come out of the gates fast. That we've got to extend or make permanent the Trump tax cuts. I think we've got to reassert American energy dominance and get rid of these failed green policies. I think we've got to adjust the budget deficit. We're running a 7% deficit to GDP, and I've talked to President Trump about getting that down. And we've got to address the affordability crisis that's hitting the millions of Americans. And, to me, I call it, we've got to reprivatize the economy. The Biden economy has been a return to central planning that failed in the 60s and 70s. It gave us a great inflation, and gave us a great inflation again. What Thomas Sowell calls the vision of the elites has failed the American people, and Donald Trump has come to the rescue.
I thank you for joining us. We're talking to Scott Bessent, who serves as an economic advisor to President Donald Trump. He was out there on the plane in those final weeks of the campaign, turned out to be indispensable as an asset for the president. a man who I've gotten to know recently, but for whom I have enormous respect. He's a fellow supply-sider, I guess you could say, and someone who understands that economic growth and a rising tide lifts all boats. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back with more of Scott Bessent right here on The Roger Stone Show.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
I'm Roger Stone. We're back on The Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Scott Bessent, who is a top economic advisor to President Donald Trump. He's also CEO and founder of Key Square Capital Management. He has been out on the road with the president, supplying economic advice and helping the campaign that won the historic victory that we saw last Tuesday. We're honored to have him. You know, in 1988, the first time that I spoke to President Donald Trump about seeking the presidency, although he was skeptical that the time was right for him and for his ideas, we took this exploratory trip to New Hampshire. He spoke to the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Chamber of Commerce. I had arranged for that. It's the first time I ever saw the Trump electricity in a political context. There were more people who showed up to watch the black helicopter land with Trump on the side than had been at the luncheon for Vice President George Bush the month before. I think there were 1,500 people. And he spoke in that speech about the unfair trading relationships that he had. I remember him saying, when it comes to trading, they send killers to negotiate and we send social workers. How do we go back to addressing our trading relationships to deal with those countries who are manipulating our currency and taking advantage of us in our trading relationships?
Yeah, well, Roger, you know, as you noted, President Trump has indicated that we are going to reorder our trading relationships. They are not working for the American people. Since 1991, the U.S. has gone into large deficits in our trading accounts with our counterparties. Some of them have accumulated huge surpluses, which, you know, as an economist, tells me that there is a gigantic imbalance. And those imbalances are due to unfair trading practices. And, Roger, I've been doing this for 35 years. I've met leaders from around the world, and Donald Trump is the most sophisticated politician, movement leader of a movement that I have met on economics and trade. He is bringing back tariffs as a negotiating tool and as a revenue tool, and the academic academy is out of their mind over it. And it's because President Trump has such an open mind and wants to, he realizes that it's not, the system hasn't been working for the American people, and we're going to fix it. But at the end of the day, I remember when he was leaving the G7 meeting in Ottawa to go to North Korea, that he told all the participants there, if you drop all your tariffs, I'll drop mine. So at the end of the day, he wants free trade, but we haven't had fair trade, we haven't had reciprocal trade, and it hasn't worked for working class Americans.
No, I think that's exactly right. At heart, he's actually a free trader, but he recognizes that our trading partners don't allow us free trade. So he's used tariffs as a club to get them to play fair with the United States. I was intrigued when he threw out the idea, just as a concept, of doing away with the income tax entirely. Until 1917, although it was first proposed in 1913, until 1917, we had no federal income tax. We existed solely on the revenues from tariffs. Is that actually feasible?
Roger, I think a hybrid system will be the best system, and a group of us are going to be spending our time over the next couple of weeks figuring out what part of the income tax system can be replaced with tariffs, because tariffs are a very interesting economic beast that make it easy on me. If we say, okay, we're going to put a 10% tariff on all of our foreign trade, well, the currency goes up traditionally about 4%. Then there are elasticities, their preferences, and the foreign manufacturers may lower their prices. Factories may get moved to other countries, or better yet, the factories may come back to the U.S. So this talking point that the Harris campaign had saying, oh, it's a 10% tax on Americans, it's not. A tariff is a very fluid and dynamic form of taxation. So I think over the coming weeks and months, we're going to be examining what's the optimal mix of tariffs, individual income taxes, corporate taxes. But again, it's because Donald Trump had such an open mind, he wasn't clinging to the traditional dogma.
We got about 3 minutes here, and so a tough question, but I've written 2 books on Richard Nixon. I acknowledge that closing the gold window, which he did at the behest of Secretary of the Treasury John Connally, along with the wage and price controls, were among his greatest mistakes. What is the role that gold plays in America's economic future?
Well, Roger, I think that I've been a big bull on gold for the past 3 years, and what we're seeing is good and bad. We have under many of the previous administrations, this out-of-control spending, overuse of sanctions. I believe in sanctions, but they should be muscular and targeted. A lot of countries have been leaving the U.S. dollar and moving into gold. China's been accumulating gold. I read the other day that Poland wants to have 20% of their reserves in gold. The U.S. still has a very large amount of gold, and interestingly, we still carry it on at the 1971 price. But leaving the Bretton Woods Gold Standard Accord is what has allowed this massive government spending, and gold was the check on that. And I think we've got to get the spending and these deficits back in control. And as Steve Forbes says, you look at the price of gold, and the U.S. dollar has devalued quite a bit.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there. I appreciate your joining us, Scott Bessent, the top economic advisor to President Donald Trump, according to the Associated Press and Reuters, a top contender to be Treasury Secretary of the United States. A brilliant man. I appreciate your joining us today with your time. Scott, I wish you the very best. And, well, just as a personal preference, I hope the president chooses you as his Treasury Secretary. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.
Roger, you're a great American. Good being with you.
American Giant makes great clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, and more right here in the U.S. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, code STAPLE20.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC, the most influential, powerful, strong, entertaining AM radio station in America today. Well, folks, it's over and the dust has settled. Donald Trump didn't just win, he won by a landslide. You'll remember that's not what the polls and the pundits were telling us. There's a lot of gnashing of teeth over there at the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. There should probably be a wellness check on those who work at the Daily Beast. Hell, they don't even hide who they are. But Donald Trump persevering in the most difficult political campaign for president in history. He wasn't just fighting the Democrats. He wasn't just fighting the media. He was fighting for his life. That's because they weaponized the criminal justice system, and they wanted to first impoverish him, strip him of all of his wealth, bankrupt him in an illicit proceeding in Manhattan, one that I'm confident will be ultimately overturned on appeal. Then they wanted to lock him up in a completely fraudulent case in which the Manhattan district attorney couldn't even identify the crime. It is outrageous. Imagine the stress of knowing that 24 or 48 hours from now, that you would either be stripped of all your worldly possessions, have your reputation ruined, and most likely die in a dank federal prison, or you would have an opportunity to go down in history as one of our greatest presidents and to restore this country to unprecedented peace, prosperity, safety, security, and strength. Look, I worked for Richard Nixon. He was a very tough guy. I worked for Senator Bob Dole. He was tough as nails, but neither one of them was as tough as Donald Trump. Late last week, I wrote a piece in Substack in which I warned President Donald Trump that I did not think that he could trust former CIA Director and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. You see, that's because Pompeo is a neocon who not only champions endless wars, but according to an authoritative piece in Yahoo.com, actually wanted to assassinate journalist Julian Assange. Assange's crimes were merely getting his hands on classified documents and publishing them to establish and expose the fact that both Republicans and Democrats had lied repeatedly to the American people about drastic issues such as war. In other words, Julian Assange is a journalist who does exactly what the folks at the Washington Post and the New York Times do. They publish classified documents when they come into their possessions. Perhaps you've heard of the Pentagon Papers case. That's when the Supreme Court ruled that both the Times and the Post could publish documents that they had obtained, regardless of how they had obtained them. Now, on Tuesday, Donald Trump overwhelmingly defeated Kamala Harris to become our 47th president and completed the greatest political comeback in American history. Somewhere from heaven, Dick Nixon, the previous holder of that title, was looking down and smiling. With this victory, Trump has cemented his legacy as one of the most important Americans to ever live. His actions were vindicated in the eyes of the American people and the political realignment that he has wrought, bringing Robert F. Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard and Governor Rod Blagojevich and other common-sense Democrats into a new coalition to move this country forward is one of the most important developments in my lifetime. Trump is a living legend, and he's going to be revered as such for the rest of his time in office. The significance of Trump's presidential victory cannot be erased, but with his reinvigorated star comes the danger now of infiltration. You see, I've seen this movie before. What happens when they can't beat you is they seek to co-opt you. They seek to surround you with people who think that it is their job to dilute, slow down, or even stop Donald Trump's America First agenda. Now, I believe Donald Trump was ousted the first time via a deep state coup and then blamed for the Fedsurrection on January 6th. The rats were fleeing the ship, and it was easy to see the enemy's true colors. But now that Trump is back on top, well, it's very important that we separate the wheat from the chaff. Several neocons had positioned themselves to get highly influential roles within the second Trump administration, and I believe that this sinister fifth column had the potential to be harmful to the president's America First agenda, maybe even more dangerous than the leftist opinions and the cabal between the New Democrat Party and the news media. We like to call them the fake news media. No one, however, was more dangerous than Mike Pompeo. After being relatively quiet throughout the presidential season and the campaign, President Trump's former Secretary of State and CIA director then, at the last minute, appeared on the campaign trail to advocate for his former boss's victory. He said, "I was proud to be part of President Trump's team. I talked to him every day for 4 years, first as CIA director and then as Secretary of State. And what I was so proud of is the fact that we understood the greatness of this nation and we never once apologized for the United States." That's what Pompeo said at a Trump rally. The AP got it wrong when they referred to him as the most loyal member of the Trump administration. The truth of the matter is that even though Pompeo had told Trump that he would not run for president if Trump decided to run, he was, in fact, quietly and privately flirting with a potential presidential run of his own. He said, actually, in an interview, that the Republican Party should reject celebrity leaders with fragile egos. That was a thinly veiled shot at President Donald Trump. In fact, Pompeo even went on Fox to bolster Jack Smith's investigation into Donald Trump, where Trump, I think quite legally, according to previous federal court decisions, held on to classified documents from his presidency. Let's listen to Mike Pompeo speaking to Fox.
On what Donald Trump is facing, and is it right to charge him?
Brian, good morning. Great to be with you. Two things I think are both true at this point. First, if the allegations are true, and there's lots of indications that they are, President Trump had classified documents where he shouldn't have had them, and then when given the opportunity to return them, he chose not to do that for whatever reason. That's just, Brian, you talked about me having classified documents. I handled thousands and thousands of them over my time in Congress and then as a CIA director and Secretary of State. I suppose we can all make mistakes and get them to the wrong place, but when somebody identifies that, you got to turn them in. And so that's inconsistent with protecting America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. And if the allegations are true, some of these were pretty serious, important documents. And so that's wrong.
That is absolutely false. Under the Presidential Records Act, Donald Trump was entitled to have those documents. You know who said so? Judge Amy Berman Jackson, the judge who wanted to send me to prison. When Bill Clinton took classified documents and we learned that he was keeping them in the sock drawer at his home in Chappaqua, she said that was perfectly all right. But there you heard Mike Pompeo undermining President Donald Trump. It was Mike Pompeo who sent the anti-Trump stalwarts, Mary Kissel, to the State Department, James Jeffrey, an advocate for the expansion of the war with Syria, and, of course, the famous neocon Elliot Abrams, who went as our envoy to Venezuela. Pompeo is brazenly dishonest regarding his service in our intelligence industries. He actually bragged to the American public during a discussion at Texas A&M in 2019. He said, "What's the Connect motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do." Well, I was at the CIA director, and let me say it. We lied, we cheated, and we stole. It's like we had the entire training course to do so. Kind of reminds you of the glory of the American experiment, Pompeo said. It's incredible, but Pompeo also, according to Yahoo.com, wanted to lead the charge and planned to actually assassinate WikiLeaks founder, journalist Julian Assange. During the Trump administration, Assange was charged with 18 felonies, primarily under the Espionage Act, and was set up for extradition to face a federal show trial. Pompeo wanted to go further. He actually drew up a plan for the Central Intelligence Agency to unlawfully kidnap and murder Assange while he was locked in a embassy in London. That was to stop him from leaking more government secrets, which exposed the massive corruption of the deep state. If Pompeo were to be placed in a Trump administration, I wrote last week, his history shows that he would promote the hegemony of the deep state over the freedom and the rights of the American people. I wrote that last Friday. This past Saturday, yesterday, Donald Trump tweeted and posted on Truth Social, "I will not be inviting former Ambassador Nikki Haley, who I also wrote about, or former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to join the Trump administration, which is currently in formation. I very much enjoyed and appreciated working with both of them previously and would like to thank them for their service to our great nation. We will make America great again." So if I played just a tiny role in bringing Mike Pompeo's attention, real record, to the attention of one of our greatest presidents, the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln, well, I'm proud to have done so. If you're just tuning in, this is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show. And when we come back, Arnold Steinberg, one of the foremost political strategists and analysts in the country today, will join us to help size up just how big that political tsunami was last Tuesday.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show, and I'm Roger Stone. I apologize. I picked up a little cold in Madison Square Garden, one of the most incredible rallies I've ever been to, and through the stress of the election and staying up late and doing a lot of commentary, I haven't quite dumped the cold. So if I'm stifling a cold, I apologize to you for that. But joining us now, Arnold Steinberg, who I respect as one of the foremost political strategists in the country, also a shrewd analyst of the body politic. He joins us from California now to help us size up the tsunami that hit this country politically on Tuesday. Arnie Steinberg, the man who I think played the most key role in the election of one of the greatest U.S. senators in New York State history, James L. Buckley, joins us now on the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, how you doing?
I'm so delighted that you could join us because I respect your opinion over so many others in the trade. What happened in this country last Tuesday?
Well, I guess I would ask you, do you still have your Richard Nixon tattoo? I
most certainly do.
Well, you know, that recalls a parallel here because Richard Nixon was sort of the comeback kid before, and now I think that what happened with Trump, and one of the reasons why he won, is I thought a couple of years ago I saw no path for him to get the nomination. And what changed was the prosecutions there. They were such overkill, such prosecutorial misconduct that they boomeranged and really made him sort of like Rocky coming back from the politically dead. And I think that when you had that assassination attempt, and as you know a little bit about security and presidential details there, when someone who's just been shot tries to stand up, the Secret Service protocol is to bump him down as hard as possible. But they didn't do that with Donald Trump, and that picture of him emerging, I think, set in stone a position of strength that people are looking for, and it's that sort of a macro kind of environment there that that macro environment that produced the context in which the specific issues came into play, because people were looking for strength in foreign policy, and what they saw is, you know, Nikki Haley had accused Trump of chaos, and what they really saw is chaos during the Biden-Harris era. And so Trump, rather than appearing to be chaotic, appeared to be somebody where they were yearning for the old stability there. And so whereas Nixon had lost the presidency, ran for governor of California, which I think Kamala Harris may end up doing, and then Nixon came back and won the presidency in 68. And it's not just that since Grover Cleveland we're seeing this. We're seeing this in the media age. When Grover Cleveland ran, you know, our media was at an infantile stage with just basically often weekly newspapers. And in the current situation where there's a 24-hour news cycle and you have the drumbeat against Trump going on and on day after day, week after week, month after month there, it would look to a normal political analyst who lacked the perspective of a half century ago that this guy was dead in the water. And I think that he probably would have had a real problem getting the nomination if the prosecution of him was focused, narrow, highly specific, and the prosecutors themselves were credible. And so the question that we have to ask is, with the Nixon election there, some people thought it was transformational, and when the Watergate situation occurred, whatever transformation was very much compromised. Here in this situation, I think the only way we're going to know if it's transformational is in the next midterms and maybe the presidential election. Do the inroads that were made here appear significant? Now, the Arthur Finkelstein, who has passed away, who we both knew, his analysis of the 70 Buckley election and what was a precursor to the 72 Nixon re-election was a phenomenon of what he called the peripheral urban ethnics, those who lived sort of in the outer ring of the city, not quite suburbia. We've seen something analogous to this right now there, where we heard about the suburban mobs and all of that there. But what we saw is people, not necessarily in the central core of the city, not in the most troublesome crime areas, but in the areas that were adjacent that found themselves troubled by crime. Here in California, you know, we had this surge in shoplifting there where you could take up to $900 and not be prosecuted. So the gangs were going, and they went from store to store, and each time somebody would take $800 worth of stuff or something there. Those kinds of things we were seeing all over. In fact, way beyond sort of the inner city super high crime area. So we've had this kind of instability there. So the question is whether the marginal inroads that we've made here are going to be permanent or semi-permanent. And that answer really has to do with the transition period and what happens thereafter, to what extent we're going to consolidate these gains and not put on the table issues that could jeopardize them. So if President Trump continues his position, which is that abortion is a state issue and keeps the federal government out of it except for funding there, that's going to be a positive for strengthening this transformational surge that we've seen. If, on the other hand, we start playing with very divisive issues, we could jeopardize it. And I think what the other side has done that has given us this chance is they have so segmented and marginalized and disunified the American population there that even those who were normally not receptive to a Republican candidate became receptive because they saw the seeds of disunity planted, and they found that really very, very unsettling. And so I think it's that backdrop where you've had a situation where for years Trump has been depicted as some sort of disuniting force. I think the overkill, calling him a fascist and a Nazi, Israel, you and I have been involved in many campaigns, and we know when you get to the extreme name-calling, it usually means you're losing. And I think that people intuitively felt that way, even though they're not political strategists or analysts there. And so the more they called him names there, the more we were really seeing a replay of the Hillary deplorables there, which alienated people who thought, I think I'm going for Trump, and then I'm being called names there. And so they're kind of on the cusp. And when you call somebody names there and you question their motivation, and they know they're not Nazis, they know they're not fascists. It's like that Babylon Bee cartoon there that had the Madison Square Garden rally, and it said record number of Jews shows up for Nazi rally there, and that was really painting the irony of what we were seeing.
I agree with everything you said, with one I guess exception. I think that the new majority coalition that Nixon began to forge in 1968, while it was temporarily stopped by Watergate, it really essentially is the coalition that comes to full fruition under Reagan. So Carter, first of all, Ford only loses very narrowly after pardoning Nixon, which is extraordinary itself. If the end of that campaign, by the way, he had spent his resources in Texas and Missouri instead of spending them in New York and Pennsylvania on the advice of his moderate Republican advisors, he might have beaten Jimmy Carter. But the coalition, the coalition remains intact. Watergate merely delays the full fruition of that ruling coalition, which in fact, by the way, is the coalition that is reassembled by Donald Trump for his election in 2016. And now he's expanded extraordinarily with deep inroads among Hispanic Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, younger Americans. These were heretofore thought to be solid Democrat constituencies. And if you think we did well in those groups in 24, wait do you see how we do with them in 28? See, the mistake that I think some political analysts make is not understanding that it doesn't matter whether you're black or Hispanic or Asian or whether you're a man or a woman, you want the same thing that all Americans want. You want economic opportunity. You want economic security. You want affordable housing. You want safe neighborhoods.
I think the assumption that because Trump takes a position for a secure border, that there's going to be a Hispanic rebellion against him. In fact, it's just the opposite, because the Hispanic and Latino voters that are here feel very strongly identification with the United States and America, and they're not keen on illegal people coming in, whether they're Hispanic or Latino heritage or not there. And, the irony of it is that Harris tried to be all things to all people, and so she wound up losing some Jewish voters and also losing some Muslim voters, because you could satisfy nobody with that kind of a situation. Trump, who was clearly supporting Israel but has a very credible, bona fide peace policy, actually made inroads compared to what he was in 2000 with Muslim and Arab American voters.
What were the other key trends here that you thought were vital? Because we have a limited amount of your time and I want your wisdom.
Well, I think the key trends were one is sort of racial divisiveness. That is to say, the tremendous emphasis upon reparations kind of issues, whatever, there didn't really help gain black voters for Harris or Biden because they already were top there. They were trying to turn out their base, yet what it did is further antagonize Latino, Hispanic voters. So that's another trend there. Secondly, I think that the emphasis upon trade and tariffs and favoritism and all that, regardless of the policy there, the emphasis upon that was bringing back those kind of working class voters who feel alienated, who are disenchanted, and feel that they're getting nowhere. What we had, though, that was a nexus here is that within their minds were not simply the economic issues, but also the issues that had to do with cultural issues, this craziness about all the genders we have and so on. So in their minds, these issues were coming together. And I think that's what's very important, is it's a subtle thing that people didn't see. And I think the final point is that, do you believe what you see or do you believe what the BS that they're telling you? And the inflation was so pronounced. It used to be, that I might say to my son, here's what this cost 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But now I'd be saying to my son, hey, this is what happened 6 months ago. And so I think what happened was a giant credibility gap when you had the Biden-Harris saying, look at the success of Bidenomics there. They would have been better off shutting up. So I think that the realism credibility was a trend here, and Trump was much more believable than Biden or Harris. And I think there was an undercurrent with the way they kind of switched Harris in at the end. Nobody really talked about it. People didn't say it's an issue to pollsters, but it was an undercurrent. It was providing a context within which they viewed all the other issues.
I'm very optimistic, Arnie, about a larger realignment in American politics, where the divide in the country is not between Republicans and Democrats, but it's between the elites, many of them unelected, by the way, and the common people, the regular people. That was the real. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's between the elite, the people who are, that Biden is wanting to go and give subsidies for their college loans, who are making a very, very good living there, and the elites who have money to go to fine restaurants, buy tickets to all sorts of very expensive concerts and so on, and they live in a world where I wouldn't say they're untouched by inflation, but somehow they're secure. And you have these other people who are working hard, and they're not simply facing economic problems, they're also facing alienation on cultural issues there. And I maintain that those two are put together in their minds there because they see it as a commonality, a common sort of contempt for them, that these people are brighter than they, what you call the unelected people in government there. And I think that you've put your finger on it there because people, as you know, it's perception, not reality in politics. And these people perceive a very profound alienation and disregard for who they are in terms of their identity. And if they were recognized and had identity and had dignity there, the elected officials would then be more concerned with the issues that affect them economically.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. My good friend Arnie Steinberg, literally one of the most brilliant political strategists and analysts in the country, joining us all the way from California. So happy to have your analysis, Arnie. Thank you for jumping in.
Roger, thank you. I hope Fauci doesn't think I caught your cold over the telephone.
I picked this up in Madison Square Garden, and I still haven't gotten rid of it, but I will. But I couldn't call in sick on this day of celebration for those who love America. Arnie Steinberg.
You can hardly call it this day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Roger.
It's The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back. Joining us now again is Scott Bessent. He is one of President Donald Trump's top economic advisors. Scott is the CEO and founder of Key Square Capital Management, known by some as the whale of Wall Street. In 1992, he helped the Quantum Fund make $1 billion, shorting the British pound. He was also dubbed as the man who broke the Bank of Japan by the Wall Street Journal, making approximately $3.5 billion on the Abenomics trade from 2012 to 2015. He actually is credited with restructuring the entire country's debt. In 2016, he has emerged as a key advisor to President-elect Donald Trump, and we are delighted to have him back on the show. Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself personally, where you're from, and the path you followed to get to where you are today.
Roger, it's a pleasure to be on. I'm from Little River, South Carolina. When I was growing up, it's a fishing village, unincorporated fishing village in South Carolina, where my family has been since about 1670. And I grew up with my cousins and pretty simple life. I was fortunate enough to go to Yale and stayed up in the Northeast, worked in London, in New York. And then in 2020, I decided to come back to South Carolina, moved about 100 miles away to Charleston. And all my friends say, well, you have passport stamps from 58 countries, but you ended up 100 miles from where you were born.
That's quite a life story. What an amazing day on Tuesday. You got to travel with the president in his final weeks on the campaign. I spoke to him. He raised your name when I saw him at Mar-a-Lago for dinner Friday night, and I share his exceedingly high regard for you. Now, some folks have pointed to the fact that in your business record, in your past, you worked for George Soros, and some of those folks don't recognize that you are among the most loyal Trump supporters and believers, but I thought I'd give you an opportunity to address your critics who point to your work for Soros.
Roger, thanks for asking that question. I point out a couple of things. Soros Fund Management was kept very separate from the Soros foundations. And many investment firms have, they're Democrats and Republicans. I haven't spoken to Mr. Soros since 2016. When I arrived at the firm in 1988, the Soros Foundation, which has thousands of people now, it was 2 Hungarians and 3 Russians, and all they were doing was sneaking fax machines behind the Iron Curtain to help bring the Iron Curtain down. And then George got involved with U.S. politics around 2004, and I can't explain his point of view, but what I can say is that those who have seen the other side, I always find the most adamant anti-communist are those from communist countries. So, I've seen how the other side works. I am 100% dedicated. I've been using my resources to push back against him in school board races, in district attorney races, and obviously President Trump, for me, has just been this fantastic leader, as you said, of a movement, and is the most important political figure of this century. And I've had the pleasure of knowing the Trump family for 30 years. I was very good friends with the president's brother, Robert, who passed away when he was in office. And about in May of 2023, when everyone on Wall Street thought that Donald Trump didn't have a chance, I was watching this pattern. And the pattern was, the more this lawfare happened to President Trump, the higher he went in the polls and the more money he raised. And in Wall Street, that's called going up on bad news. So when a company reports bad earnings or something bad happens, but the stock goes up, there's something going on there that the market's not recognizing. So I was all in for President Trump. I was one of the few Wall Street people, backing him. But to get back to Soros Fund, I was never on board with Mr. Soros' policies. I worked at the fund management company, and funnily enough, two of the other CIOs, Stan Druckenmiller, who's a very large Republican donor, a bit more traditional, and then followed by Bob Bishop, who I think you probably know from Mar-a-Lago, is a real great supporter of President Trump. So, there have been three CIOs who have departed ways with Mr. Soros on policy.
Well, we've spent enough time on that. My friend Larry Kudlow, for whom I have enormous respect and affection, really the quarterback of Donald Trump's plan to revitalize America's economy in his first term, thinks very highly of you, thinks you ought to be Secretary of the Treasury. The Associated Press and Reuters both report that you are on the short list for that job. Well, and if Larry Kudlow loves you, that's good enough for me. You're the guy who coined the phrase Trump trade months ago. What were you talking about?
Well, what I was talking about was the market kept going up every time President Trump went higher in the polls. And it occurred to me that what was really happening was even back in February, March, April, as he got stronger and stronger in the polls, the market was focusing on November 5th with extending the Trump tax cuts, energy dominance, deregulation, and calming down the international situation. The stock market picks up trends usually before traders do, and I've been doing this a long time. I'm pretty good at figuring out the mind of the market. And we saw on Wednesday, after the red sweep, it was the best day in the stock market in a year. The U.S. dollar had its biggest strengthened the most in 2 years, and the Russell Index, which is the small cap index, the ETF for that index had the biggest inflows in 17 years because the stock market knows what President Trump is going to do. And back to our mutual friend Larry Kudlow, that I am in 100% agreement with Larry that we have to grow our way out of these problems. And we are going to unshackle the U.S. and it's going to be a private sector solution. And, Roger, I can tell you that being in Donald Trump's cabinet, anyone who's in it, it's an easy job because your job isn't to come up with new policies. Your job is to do what Donald Trump wants you to do. You are given marching orders, and everyone is going to figure out the most effective way to implement his policies, because these are his policies. I had the privilege of meeting with Margaret Thatcher more than 20 times. I met with world leaders, and none of them are focused on the economy the way Donald Trump is.
Well, when Mr. Blackwell died, I took on the task of publishing an international best and dressed worst list, which I have now done for 15 years straight. Larry Kudlow was on the list so many years that I had to move him to emeritus status, so he's on the list now every year. I just wanted to point that out. You have talked about a comprehensive regulatory roadmap for promoting bank lending. The thing I hear, whether it's from people trying to buy a home or people trying to start a business, big firms, small firms, they all say the same thing, that it's extremely difficult to get capital. It's hard to borrow money. How do we fix that? Well,
we've got to unleash the banking sector. And what happened in 2008, after it always happens with bank regulation or financial regulation, they close the barn door after all the horses or cows are out, and they may put in these onerous capital requirements. Silicon Valley Bank went under a few years ago, and that was a supervisory failure. It wasn't a failure of the regulations, but the regulators can't admit that it was their problem, so they want to put on more regulations. So, I think that the 5 agency heads for the economic agencies or the financial service agencies on January 20th will be asked to submit their resignations, and we will start a program of revitalizing bank lending in the United States. That I have a farming business up in North Dakota, and I can tell you that the community banks up there are the lifeblood for the farming community. And the bankers, the local and community banks, they know their customers. Their children play Little League Baseball together. They go to their schools. And the great thing about the U.S. is the broadness of our financial system. But what has happened since the great financial crisis in 2005, the 5 largest banks held 22% of the assets. Now they hold 50%. And we've got to make sure that for average people that the community banks and the small banks are there for them.
We have about 2 minutes before we have to go to a commercial break. You started talking about America entering a new golden age under Donald Trump. I like the line so much that I've stolen it. I used it in my interview with Piers Morgan this past week. But what did you mean when you said it?
Well, and to the extent that when someone takes it to sincerest form of flattery, actually Saturday Night Live used it on Saturday. I don't watch the show, but somebody sent it to me. They used the new golden age, in their weekend update section. So it's catching on. But we've had this great stock market thanks to President Trump, and now I think there is a chance to unshackle the U.S. economy. I think we don't realize how damaging all these pages and pages of regulations that the Biden administration put on and the costs that are associated with that. So I think when we bring down these regulations, when we reassert U.S. energy dominance, as President Trump calls it, we got liquid gold. And I think we're going to build out the energy infrastructure in America. And that growth will allow us to tackle the budget deficit, and inflation will come down, which means interest rates will come down. So I can see this great self-fulfilling circle where we just go from strength to strength. And we are the envy of the world. All the capital in the world wants to come here. We've seen these technology leaders. You couldn't imagine Silicon Valley going for Donald Trump in 2016 or 2020, but they were so put off by what Biden and Harris were doing that we've got Elon Musk, we've got Mark Andreessen, and so I just think we could have this period of innovation, low inflation, great growth, and then start getting our fiscal house in order.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Scott Bessent, who identified by the Associated Press and Reuters as a leading candidate for Secretary of the Treasury in the Trump administration. Don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back with this fascinating discussion.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
All right, folks, we're back on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Scott Bessent, who is an economic advisor to President-elect Donald Trump. He had the opportunity to ride the plane for the final couple weeks of the campaign. He was right there in the thick of the action. President Trump himself told me last Friday night of his high regard for our guest, and I share that high regard, just having an opportunity to get to know him over the last couple of days and read an enormous amount about him. Scott, here's a question. China is seen as an existential threat to the United States. Do you agree with that characterization, and what do we do to check China, particularly economically, in the next administration?
Well, I told President Trump when I came in about 10 or 12 months ago to see him that thus far his greatest achievement was waking the U.S. up to the threat of China and to the unfair trade practices. They've been expanding their military like crazy, and they've been trying to become the export leader in the world, but they do it through unfair trade practices. They suppress their currency, they suppress wages, and they keep U.S. companies out of the market. So, Roger, there are really two things here. There is China, the security threat, and President Trump has a fantastic relationship based on mutual respect with Xi Jinping. So I think that he will easily handle the security aspect. I was with him in a private meeting the other day, and a journalist said, well, what are you going to do about the Taiwan situation? And he said, he's not going to invade Taiwan under me. And if he does, I'll put a 200% tariff on him, and he knows that I'll crash his economy. So there's that Donald Trump using tariffs as deterrence, which no one else had thought to do. It's really unique, and it's a great strategy. On the other side, we do want to engage with China if they are willing to have fair and reciprocal trade. And we need to bring back critical U.S. industries. We realized we had a test run during COVID when we realized, excuse me, that so many of the key ingredients in our pharmaceuticals come from China. So many of the what are called rare earths, which go into high alloys. I'll tell you an interesting story. One of the brightest people who ever worked for me, this woman actually predicted the pandemic. She had been reading a lot. She thought, well, the world's setting itself up for a pandemic. And she went and started a mask company, but then it turned out 60% of the supplies for the mask came from China, so she wasn't able to access them. So I think it's three pieces there. There's the military security piece. Let's get free and fair trade and set up a reasonable relationship with China, and let's secure our supply chains and make sure that we never have what could have happened during COVID happen again.
Some of our adversaries produce some of the most valuable resources, uranium, the lithium, other things we need for batteries. How do we help the U.S. grow our own energy dominance, beyond oil and gas?
Well, first of all, Roger, rare earths are not rare. The U.S., we've got plenty of rare earths here. It's a permitting problem. And I think once was Department of Energy, the Department of Interior, once they fix the permitting problem, then I think we will go back to mining and producing these things ourselves. I think that this year or in the past year, China has bet. Everyone says, "Oh, China's solar and they're green." Well, that's the big lie. They built 100 coal plants last year, but more importantly, they built 10 nuclear plants. And nuclear is the wave of the future for the U.S. Our northern neighbor and our closest ally, Canada, has plenty of uranium. And I think we have got to start permitting and building the nuclear plants again, which are going to drive the AI data wave that we're going, or the AI wave that we're going through. And I tell you, this AI wave could be as big as the second industrial revolution in 1890. President Trump likes to talk about President McKinley and how great the country did under him, with tariffs. But the other thing that drove the country then was just the expansion of the industrial base through the railroads. So this AI build out we've got to think of a way to power the electricity without making electricity prices go up for consumers. And, I think it'll be energy. I think the bridge fuel will be nat gas. And we've got plenty of nat gas. We've just got to get the permitting done and the energy infrastructure built out.
Now, some argue that halting the illegal immigration into our country could have adverse effects on our economy. These views seem strange to me. Can you debunk that notion, explain why it's critical, actually, for our economic and national security?
Well, a couple of things. Those who say that the GDP will go, or it'll be inflationary if we follow through on the deportation that President Trump's talking about, I would just point out that we didn't let in, but Biden and Harris let in between 10 and 20 million people, and we had the worst inflation in 40 years. So, that doesn't really resonate with me. And it's a national security issue, and having more people in the country makes GDP go up. But what we care about is GDP per capita per American citizen. And I will tell you that the reason President Trump, and he's the only one who could have done it, he assembled a multiracial working class party and then complemented that with some of the greatest entrepreneurs in the world and then patriots. And that's the new Republican Party. And the working Americans, I can tell you that President Trump is committed to it. I am committed to it because at a point in my life, my family had financial hardship. I've known financial anxiety. And I do not want that for any family. But I'll call it an invasion that happened at the border, that this has suppressed the wages of the bottom 25 or 50% of wage earners, and that's going to stop. So their wages will go up, not down. And the top 10% under Biden and Harris did great. The bottom 50% saw real losses in purchasing power and affordability crisis, and they came out and exercised their right to vote at the ballot box and put President Trump, he got the popular vote because of them.
Now, you've been very bullish on gold for the past several years. This show is actually sponsored by the Colonial Metals Group, who the folks I like when it comes to diversifying your retirement nest egg with precious metals like gold and silver. Are you still bullish on gold? And then beyond that, what do you think of cryptocurrencies?
Sure. So I'm still bullish on gold. One thing that may slow down the rise of gold a little is that with President Trump's back, we are committed to getting this budget deficit under control because gold is the ultimate hedge against the spending or overspending prolific countries. But all the other countries are still doing it. They know that their currencies are being devalued. So what you're seeing is major central banks around the world, ex the U.S., I think they're going to continue accumulating gold, and there's going to be a constant bid there for gold. So I am quite bullish. I think the price rise will be more measured because we're going to get our U.S. fiscal house in order.
All right, there you have it. Scott Bessent, economic advisor to President-elect Donald Trump, a man who the Associated Press and Reuters both report is on the short list to be potentially Secretary of the U.S. Treasurer under President Donald Trump, who will be the 47th President of the United States. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger.
All right, folks, don't go away because my buddy Joe Piscopo, that great Italian-American, is going to be along in just a minute. This guy's got a set of pipes himself that won't quit, but he'll be right along with Sundays with Sinatra, and you don't want to miss that. So thank you for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. And until next Sunday, God bless you and speed.